Got it.
Okay. Let people in.
Do you think you'll get to the march in Washington on Tuesday? I don't
Next
know.
week,
Yeah,
probably not.
I probably won't be here. Hi, Randy. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
You good to see you. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ferret.
No, of course. Let me make you
Enjoy the
host.
evening. I hope the food's good.
It's always good. It's amazing. I've had duck for the first time. I made a
Oh,
shachiat. Had it before.
well, don't get used to it, but you might.
I know.
Be well, sweetie. Be well. Bye bye.
Let me make you host. All righty.
Thank
Take
you. Right.
Bye.
Bye bye. Hi, Ken. How are you? We'll see who's going to join us tonight. We have a few more people coming in, I believe.
All right. I'm going to go get my food.
Get your food before he gets you. Right.
Yeah.
Rev Moshe, are you coming down for the rally next week, or is anybody from
I don't
TPC?
think I am, but TBC is arranging something. CJP is arranging something. It's there was a bus that's leaving at a certain hour on Monday, and getting there, so people are going to have to find places to stay on Monday. So I don't know what who's going to do that or not, but
we can probably host.
Well, there are people who will be able to afford being in a hotel. They have some hotel reservations made as well.
Oh,
but
okay.
there are people, if you'd like to offer your place for one or two people, are you in Washington itself?
I'm in Arlington, so I'm 2 miles out,
Right.
3 miles out.
Right. So if you want to send something to community chat saying that there is room for one or two people, then that might convince one or two people to come. Okay. You know community chat, right? At tbcbrookline.org.
Yes. I haven't done that in a while, but yes. But thank you.
It's just community chat. And that might, entice people.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Hi, Lily. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing?
Hello. How are you?
We're fine, I guess. We'll see who joins us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed reading 13 to 20. I found it to be a fantastic story. A really great story.
I'm looking forward to your commentary since I got a little lost in the story.
Yes, it's easy to get lost because there's a lot of names, and the names are not as important as the basic plot. But it is an adventure story. There's no question about it. A lot of intrigue and stuff like that. So we'll be reviewing that today. And we'll move on to the next assignment, which will be the end of our class next week.
Well, that's really sad. I'd rather keep going.
Well, we'll see. I'm trying to figure out what I'll do for next semester, where I am a civilian, as a civilian.
We can work that out. We'll make it happen.
Well, there's so many requests for different things, which is nice to have. So I have to sort of weigh it well. Hi, Michael. Hi, Ed. How are you, feeling, Ed? You feeling good?
Doing okay.
You're looking good. You're looking good. Your cheeks are round. Let me see. Your cheeks are pink. I can't tell. Because you have to give a knip in the And that knip made it real good. Yes, Jeff.
So how about Kings? We could finish with David and Kings and then go on to Solomon.
Maybe, yeah. First of all, I'll be assigning for this, as you should read the first two chapters, of course, in Kings 1, because that's where the story really totally ends.
Yeah, that's where it ends.
So when you go to Sepharia.org and you go Tanakh, right? Tanakh, and then you go to Samuel 2, right? When you have a choice of translations, pick the shotgun translation. That's the one that Fox did, which I like.
What's it called?
You have choices. Whatever translation you pick is fine. But I'm saying on Sepharia you get a choice of different translations. So if you want to look it up. Hi everybody.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Good. Good to see you. Good to see you all. Phyllis is joining us. Great. We'll have a few people coming on. I'll take a minute or two. Hi Tammy. How are you? Mr. Ecker, how are you?
Okay.
Good.
I'm fine, thank you. I'm back. Thank you for your flexibility and allowing this coming and going.
Because I don't think we've ever met in person. Have we or have we?
Bye.
Outside this class, we haven't met.
That's what I was wondering, because it's
Years ago.
Years ago, we were all young. Who knows?
We certainly were. We
Yes,
certainly
we were.
will. Thank you
Yeah.
for the welcome.
Still
Hi,
a young,
Phyllis.
still young at heart. Hi, Phyllis. How are you doing?
Hi. Okay.
Okay, so let's begin. I think I'll give them 2 more minutes, etc. We'll see. It's always the problem of having a course 6 weeks long. You begin to lose focus. So maybe in the future just have one session. Do it all.
No.
A 5-hour session. You don't mind.
It's a lot of reading, actually.
It's adventure, isn't it? Adventure. It's like,
oh, I love it. It's wonderful.
Amazing. I mean, to have all that stuff. Hi, Alan's connecting. Hi, Alan. How are you? Good. Okay, so we have a crowd. Well, wait 1 more minute, and then we shall begin. So
I think you've got a minion.
Oh, I have to get the
let's go.
so, afterwards.
1 more minute before we do 7:35, and it's good to see you all. It's good that we're doing this, and that some people are sticking around. I got a lot of notes from people with good reasons not to attend, and I said fine, it's okay. It is being recorded, so people who are not here tonight will be able to see it. So 1 more minute, and we'll go. Okay, we'll start. So, my friends, we asked you to read a lot because it's all one big story, right? The story of Avshalom. And if you want to see perhaps and understand that the pivot point for this new kind of vulnerability that David has, okay, we've not seen him very vulnerable until now, right? They say, at least the scholars who study this stuff say, it's basically because of the David and Bathsheba event. Somehow he has something has changed in him. He no longer has that same forcefulness. And in the case of his son Avshalom, it's really fascinating because all through the story, if you've read it, I think many of you have read it, he's always concerned about him.
Yeah.
He remains concerned. He says, well, if you get him, be easy on him, right, etc. So it's another example of what's going on now is that the way Shaul, right, chased him and was jealous of David. Now we have, if you will, midah keneged midah. What goes around turns around, and now he has this young fellow, Avshalom, who has his attributes. Right, he's handsome, he's courageous. Right, he's his father's son in a way, and he is now in the reverse position. And you'll see that part of the treachery, as you remember, the treachery is that the fact that he is betrayed by someone who is from the house of Shaul, if you remember, who comes to him and tells him all these things. So in a sense, there are still people, even though he's really at the apogee of his reign, right? He's very powerful. There's still people who are seeking vengeance against him because of what happened to Shaul. So the story is quite remarkable, but it opens on a very, very stark note, if you recall. How does the story open? It opens with this treachery of Amnon, another one of his sons. I have a feeling a son by another mother, perhaps. I'm not sure it's that Avshalom and Amnon are from the same mother, but they're certainly from the same father. And Amnon has a sister. Again, not sure it's probably not a sister of his mother, right? It's probably of some other concubine or wife that David has, and he has he's lustful after her, right? If you recall the story, right? He's very lustful after her, and through an act of treachery, he accosts her and forces her to him. He rapes her. He rapes her, basically. So it's an odious thing. As the first thing she says after she says to him, "Don't do this vile thing." You remember that? Don't do this. This is not the way we act. We don't act this way. We don't act this way. We don't rape our women, etc. Of course, it doesn't. She does not prevail, and she is indeed raped, and she is humiliated more than anything else, because what was a great value in those days, of course, was being a betula, a virgin, right? So she has lost that. Now, once you lose that, by the way, you're losing a lot of status, and certainly getting married again becomes an issue, right? And David hears about this, right? And he's appalled, but somehow he doesn't react in a very direct way, except that Avshalom does. Avshalom's protecting his kid sister, or whoever it is, and Avshalom kills Amnon. Okay, so we have rape and killing right at the beginning. So it wakes you up here, right? And these chapters from 13 to 20 are basically a story of their own. They have their own beginning, their own middle, and their own end. And what we have is this point in the story where David is really, as I said, made vulnerable and has to leave his precincts to cross over the Jordan and basically wait to see what develops. And of course, the story is that Avshalom has gathered up people very similar to the people that perhaps David gathered up. Interesting. Who were they? Miscreants, people who had a quarrel with the king, people who felt that they were not being treated fairly. So they joined Avshalom, who will be in rebellion against David. He also begins to take on a role in which he says, "Oh, I would like to be the judge." Now, the word judge, shofet, meant more than just a judge like in a court. It meant like the book of Shoftim, right? People who led the people, right? So he's wanting to become if you will, king. And then he goes even further and he says, all those who are for me, and he gets a permission from his father David, who's not really too astute about this, and he gets permission to leave and go to Hebron, and Hebron, where it was the capital of David's early kingdom, and he there gathers the folks to come to Hebron and to do what? To anoint him king. Okay, so we have a very clearly set up, like, if you know, as I say, it's like the Game of Thrones. Everybody's vying for positioning, right? And of course, the word must have gone out. I have a feeling, but it's a little unclear. Has the word gone out already in the conversation that Bathsheba had with David, as you will see later on in the end of the story, that Shlomo has been chosen? It's unclear yet if everybody knows that, and eventually she will, at the end of the story, we'll get to that next week. She will basically get David to promise her that David will be succeeded by her son Shlomo. Okay, so in the story we get a lot of twists and turns. We get a lot of interesting ideas of how one vies for power. We also see that, as I say, there's a certain kind of maybe, I don't use the word blindness, but David doesn't seem to observe real well what Avshalom's plans are. As a matter of fact, when Avshalom, after hearing that David hears that Avshalom killed Amnon, who he seemed to like, that's another thing. David seems to be a good father in a sense. He has relationships with his sons. He loves them. He's proud of them, etc. So when Amnon is killed, Avshalom knows he has to get out of town if the word gets there, and he goes away to Geshur, which was up in the north. And then he basically is brought back from Geshur, and he does it in a very interesting way. And then he says, "I don't want to see you. You can come back, but I don't want to talk to you." So he's there for 2 years, according to the text. 2 years before he forces Yoav, the general, to say, "I can't take this anymore. He has to see me." And eventually he is allowed to see him. And then it becomes very clear that there's going to be this competition that is being set up between the two. So the story goes on, obviously. And what is fascinating about the story ultimately is that Avshalom is sort of hoisted on his own petard in a way. As a matter of fact, he will basically become a victim of his own intrigue and will also be killed. And at this time, as I said earlier, David is concerned, and he tells the people, "I know this guy's up against me, trying to rebel, but he's still my son, be easy with him, meaning don't kill him, bring him, capture him, or whatever it is. Don't kill him. But eventually he is killed in a very strange way, with being stuck in a tree. Remember that? He gets stuck in a tree, and his head's locked between these two branches of a tree. You can imagine a strange kind of situation. He's still alive, and but then he is killed.
He gets stuck because of his long, beautiful hair.
That's what he says. But he used to shave his hair. Remember that you said that he would shave his hair every year, and his hair was so weighty. It was weighty with it was very a lot of hair. Now, why was this why is this a characteristic? Who else had hair that was fantastic?
Shimshon.
Shimshon. What was Shimshon's role? He was a shofet. He was a judge, right? Shimshon was one of that group of people who led the people of Israel. And of course, Shimshon's story was probably well known. And maybe the reason he had such luxuriant hair was it did give him, if not real power, a sense of power, right? Sense of power. In the case of Shimshon, he had become a Nazir, someone who had promised not to cut his hair and not to imbibe anything of any grape products, etc. And it was a sort of a taking on of a certain kind of vow, a vow that that allowed him to sort of operate in this quasi priestly holiness, etc., by being a Nazir. But then, of course, we didn't get a chance to read the story of Samson and Delilah, but you've all seen the film, so he doesn't do well at the end. And if you recall, he's taken into Gaza. Yes, Gaza is always there, friends. It's always something with Gaza. Back in the old days too. We mentioned that that strip, the Gaza Strip, which is the one we see today, was called Philistia back then. That's why you get the name Philistine, Palestine, etc. And they were ongoing incursions, believe it or not, right, by the Philistines, and that was always rebuffed by the kingdom of Israel. So the story of Samson is that he is seduced by this woman named Delilah, who is a Philistine, and his head is shaved, and he loses the power supposedly that came from his hair, and he's brought into Gaza as a prisoner, and he's blinded. There's either a play or a story called Eyeless in Gaza, Eyeless, I don't know, etc. There's also a great play called Samson Agonistes. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Not sure who wrote it. Milton.
Milton wrote that.
Right? Milton.
Yeah, and Alice in Gaza is a line from there too.
Powerful play, and they want to humiliate him. He's been blinded. His strength is still being used a bit. He's doing all kinds of labor, and he's brought to the palace in Gaza, and he is chained to two pillars. If you remember this from the movie, whatever, he's chained to two pillars. And he says, Lu matnu ima plishtim. He says, well, if I have to go, and I will go, I'm going to be killed. I know that. But let me take all of you with me. And he pulls the pillars in, and the structure collapses, and everybody there is killed. Sort of a denouement to the story, right? That ultimately, perhaps you could say Samson was victorious, even though he had been captured and put into a position where he would not be able to survive. So that's possibly, Michael, where the story of the hair might be there, that etc. Because we don't really know much about whether the Nazir thing was real or not. We don't know. But the bottom line is it's very much in keeping with that story. And Avshalom, eventually at the end, he's after he's killed, they put a mound on top of him of stones, big mound of stones. And today, if you go to the valley, right, of Kidron in Yerushalayim, which you can see from Har HaZeitim, the Mount of Olives, you'll see a structure there, quite an elaborate structure, thin top, and then goes into like a box-like thing, and that's called Yad Avshalom. That's the memorial for Avshalom. It still exists to this day. We're not sure exactly when it was built, but certainly the tradition that's where it happened is still there. So, what do you take from the story about politics, about what's going on in that world. Anybody have a reflection upon that?
Reb Moshe?
Yes.
It's not an unusual story about sons and the taking over of who's going to get to become the king. We see, I'm studying the in Second Kings, and you see this happening in Second Kings also. That sons are trying to usurp the power from the person that either the previous king has designated, or the rivalry is such. Sometimes they have all the other brothers killed.
Yes.
I mean, it get really ugly.
Oh, it's ugly here too, but I mean, it
Yeah.
gets even uglier. You know, this brings me back to thinking about Shmuel's warning to the people. You don't want a king. You don't need a king, and you don't want a king. They said, no, we need a king. We need a king because I mentioned to you earlier. Why? Because of the fact that the king served as a military, if you will, figure who can bring people, armies together, et cetera, which may not have been possible without a king. Remember, a king is always seen as the organizing principle of a community, the king. He creates a realm, and he offers, what's the deal? He offers people protection. In what does he get back? Tribute, honor, all that kind of stuff. Particularly tribute, by the way. They have to give money to this king, right, in order for him to protect them, etc. So maybe that's the fact that the institution of monarchy is ultimately easily corruptible. And not only that, but to get all this vying for power, that you begin to see fairly cruel acts done in order to acquire that power. So I think that's really what the story is telling us. Basically, is that there's a certain flaw, I think, and this is corroborated all through the books of Kings, where we rarely find a decent king. Go through dozens of them, and then when the kingdom splits, obviously for the north and the south after Shlomo, you get rivalries, etc., of the different kings in different places. But ultimately, it's saying something that later on we will see which we see, I think, retrojected into the Torah in the book of Devarim. We find laws of kings, and those laws of kings obviously is a result of seeing how the monarchy could be corrupted. And the laws of kings are quite interesting. If you recall, I may have mentioned it, they're not allowed to have a lot of money.
Not a lot of money, not a lot of wives, not a lot
of
horses.
wives. They shouldn't have a lot of horses, which Shlomo loved. They have famous stables of Solomon. Why not horses? Because the best horses were in Egypt, and you might return to Egypt to get horses. You shouldn't do that. More importantly, he is not above the law. In the book of Devarim, is not above the law. He has to, as a matter of fact, write a Torah, possibly the book of Devarim, write a Torah by his hand. He has to copy out a law as like a constitution, and he has to carry it with him all the time, and he has to read from it every day in order to remind him that he is not above the law. He's part of the community, not apart from it. Yes, sir. There was a hand up there. Somebody got a hand up? Anybody? No?
I do have a hand up. Yes. I just this is kind of interesting.
I'm sorry. I'm just in a moment. Yeah.
But we talk about the corruption of kings, and yet this imagery for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that God is the king and that we accept him as our king, is almost like this idealized version of what we had always hoped a king would be, or this idea of kingship in a more idealized way.
Well, or going back to Shmuel saying, you have a king already, who's not corruptible.
Right, God, yeah.
Not corruptible, but I mean, it's obviously not a king who's going to organize the troops for you, right? You're going to have to do that anyway.
Well, sometimes he does.
Sometimes he does, but he's basically always saying, gather the troops and I'll support that. I mean, God will be on your side, as we often hear in conflicts. Everybody's got God on their side. Bruce.
So there's also amazing sexual transgressions throughout here. I mean, David and Bathsheba, Amnon and Tamar, and then Avshalom sleeps with his father's 10 concubines.
Right. First of all, I found it bizarre that he leaves the 10 concubines to guard his palace. I said, these must be a hell of a concubines here. Yes, and of course that's the most, if you will, blatant way of defiling. If your father is basically taking on his concubines, we have a episode in the Genesis where the firstborn Reuven loses his firstborn status because he sleeps with one of the concubines of Jacob, his father. So that's a real no, right? That's a real no. Right. So you have a lot of sexual transgression. You have a lot of issues of jealousy, of pride, all of those things, which make a great story. You see, these are not cardboard cutouts. They seem to be flesh and blood, and they feel that, and they're filled with all of the if you will, pluses and minuses of being a human being, right? Temptations, lust, power. That's why I think it's just a fantastic story. It does, as Ed always reminds me, well, what do we learn from this? Is there a moral to the story? And I think for me, the moral of the story is don't make kings. Even though we have a lot of politicians who would like to be the king, if you know what I mean. I don't have to mention names, right? Who want to be the king, right? Whereas Mel Brooks once said, right, it's good to be the king, if you remember that film, History of the World Part 1. I advise you to see it. Not very PC today, but you'll enjoy it, I'm sure. Okay. So that's the saga, and it's a really fantastic story. And the way it's told, I like the way it's told as well. It's told with a certain way to keep the suspense going. It's told with a certain way that you're able to understand a little bit more about the psychology behind it. Now, I was reading a passage just today. Again, I read this all the time, back and forth, because I really enjoyed it. Okay, here it is. Chapter 13, page 16. Okay. Okay, what's it? So he has, at a certain point, his fortress threatened, and he leaves. If you remember, David leaves and he crosses over. The word crossing over is there a lot too. Crossing over. Crossing over means crossing over boundaries as well. You know what I mean? They're always crossing over. The word is used again and again. La'avor, to go over, which is the root of the word avera in Hebrew, which is transgression. So there's a lot of transgressing going on in this back and forth. So David has crossed a little beyond the summit he's walking up to the Har Zaytim, up to the Mount of Olives, and all of his people are with him. And she says, and he went to the town of Bachurim. This is verse 5 in chapter 6:16. David came to Bachurim. Interesting term. The word means place of chosenness. Bachur also means a choice, bechira, to this place of Bachurim. And a man was going out from there, from the clan of the house of Shaul, and his name was Shimi, the son of Gera, going out, and cursing him. And then he pelts David with stones, and all of King David's servants, along with all the fighting people, and all the mighty men of his right and his left. And thus did Shimi, when he cursed him, get out, man of blood, man of worthlessness. Wow, what has happened with Avshalom's rebellion is that he has freed up people to really, really come after David in a way they would never have done before. And God has returned upon you. What does he say? You have deserved all of this, because God has returned upon you all the blood of the house of Shaul, in whose place you reign as king. You usurped Shaul, thus Avshalom will usurp you. And God has given the kingdom in the hand of Avshalom, your son. For here you are in an evil fate, for you are a man of blood. And then Abishai, the son of Tzruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord king? Pray, let me cross over and take off his head. That's a way of dealing with it, I guess, right? At least it gets the person to stop talking. And David said to him, no, here my own son who came out of my body is seeking my life. How much more than the Benjamite? Who's the Benjamite? Shaul. Shaul is a Benjamite. Let him be. Let him be. It's interesting. He says, let him be that he may curse me, for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh told him to do this. Perhaps Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will look upon my affliction, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will return me a good place of his curses on this day. Then David and his men went on their way, but Shimei was going along the flank of the hill alongside him, going along and cursing and pelting stones alongside him and dumping dust on him. Just imagine the scene. I mean, it's very, very bizarre. And the king and all the people that were with him came back weary, so they paused for breath there. Now, Avshalom, I'm reading now chapter 16, verse 50. Now, Avshalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Achitophel with him. And it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Avshalom, that Hushai said to Avshalom, long live the king, long live the king. And Avshalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why didn't you go with your friend if David's your friend? And Hushai said to Avshalom, no, rather the one whom Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and this people, all the men of Israel, have chosen, for him I will be, with him I will stay. And second, whom should I serve if not the presence of his son, as I have served the presence of your father? So I will be in your presence. So he's saying, I can be anybody's helper. Whoever's in power, I will attach myself to that person who's in power. So at this point in chapter 16, it's almost quite clear Avshalom may be indeed victorious. He may be victorious. And then Achitophel said to Avshalom, and this is what you were mentioning, Bruce, come into your father's concubines, for which he left to watch over the palace house. When all of Israel hears that you've made your father weak, they will be strengthened, the hands of all who are with you. So they will spread out for Avshalom a tent on the roof. And Avshalom came into his father's concubines before the eyes of all Israel. Did it in a public way. I am despoiling, not despoiling, they're not virgins, but I am now transgressing. I am going over the boundaries. And now the advice of Achitophel, which he advised, was in those days like inquiring of the word of God. Thus was all of Achitophel's advice, so for David and so for Avshalom. These are people who, basically betrayed him. Achitophel betrayed him. And there are people who now see Avshalom as their answer. He is the one who should be a king. And then it goes on saying to Avshalom, chapter 17, I'll just go quickly. Pray, let me choose 12,000 men and let me arise and pursue after David tonight. We can get him tonight. But when I come unto him and he is weary and slack of hands, I will alarm him so that all the people that are with him will flee. And then I will strike down the king alone, and I will return all the people to you, so that when everything is returned, the man who you seek, all the people will be in peace. And the word was right in Avshalom's eyes, in the eyes of all the elders of Israel. But Avshalom said, pray, call also Hushai the Archite, the one who whispered to him earlier. We will hear what he says. And then in verse 6, when Hushai came to Avshalom, Avshalom said to him, saying, according to this word did Achitophel speak, shall we act upon his word? If not, you speak. And Hushai said to Avshalom, not good is the advice that Achitophel has advised this time. And Hushai said further, you know your father and his men. They are mighty ones, and they are bitter of feelings, like a bear bereaved in the open field. And your father's a man of war. He will not spend the night with the people. Here now, he is hiding in one of the pits or one of the halting places. And it will be when the soldiers fall in them at the start of the battle, and the hearer hears of it and says, this has been a serious blow to the people that follow after Avshalom. It's going to be embarrassing. You're not going to be able to conquer him. Don't go after him. Well, so I advise, here's what he says. Let there be gathered to you all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, like the sand that is by the sea of multitudes, with your presence walking among them. And when we come upon him in one of the places where he can be found, lighting upon him as dew falls on the ground, there will not be left of him, or to all the men that are with him, even a single one. Now, if he gathers himself into a town, he leaves the open fields, and let all Israel bring ropes to that town, and we will drag it. We'll drag the town as far as the wadi until there can be found, even cannot be found even a pebble. And Avshalom and his men said, good is the advice of Hushai, better than the advice of Achitophel. The good Hevavai is ordained to annul the good advice of Achitophel in order that Yud Hevavai might bring evil upon Avshalom. Achitophel's advice may have been my downfall. That's what he's thinking. Now, Hushai said to Tzadok and Eviatar, the priests, like this and like that. Achitophel advised Avshalom and the elders of Israel, and like this and like that, I advised. So now, send quickly and tell David, saying, don't lodge tonight at the crossing of the wilderness, and by all means cross over, lest they be swallowed up, and the king and all the people are with it. So we have basically Hushai, this guy, the Archite, being sort of a double agent. Sort of a double agent. On the one hand, he says, no, don't go after him. He might be hiding out, but we'll get him. And then he goes to David and says, you should really get out of the way because they're coming after you. That's another piece of the intrigue where people are basically playing and hedging their bets. Maybe Avshalom will make it. He'll say, I gave him a good advice. Maybe David will make it. I said, well, I gave Avshalom bad advice. That seems to be Hushai's strategy. So it goes on and it has the battle, etc. And he sent over the fighting people with Yoav and Absalom. This is just a very interesting little passage here, chapter 18. We're getting towards the end of the story. And Absalom happened upon David's servants. Absalom was riding on a mule, and when the mule came under the thick boughs of a great oak, his head became held fast in the oak, so that he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him crossed on. This is almost, I hate to say it, it's a serio-comic scene, right? It's like if you would say, have a Western, right? A comedy Western, right? This great guy comes and he's riding fast. Now, how fast can you go on a mule, to be very honest? He's riding on a mule, but the mule takes him under this tree and he gets stuck in the tree. You can imagine he's holding on, the mule keeps going, right? That's like, just picture it. It's sort of a comic scene. A certain man saw him and told Yoav. He said, I saw Absalom hanging from the oak. I love that. I saw him hanging from the oak. And Yoav said to the man, the one telling him, now here, you saw him? Why didn't you strike him down to the ground? I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. He says, I thank you for the belt. My pants kept falling down. I'm glad you're giving me a belt. That's not in the text. That's me. The man said to Yoav, if I were feeling the weight in my palms of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not stretch out my hand against the king's son. For it was in our hearing that the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, guard for me the lad Avshalom. Remember that. He said that. Guard for me the lad Avshalom. I heard David say that to you, and we should spare him. Or if I had wrought against him his life some falsehood, and nothing is concealed from the king, then you should have stood aloof. And then Yoav said, I won't wait around before you. So he took 3 darts in his palm, and he pierced Absalom's heart with them, for he had been still alive in the heart of the oak. Notice the word play. Take his heart and the heart of the oak. The use of the word heart in those two. There surrounded him 10 fighting lads, Yoav's weapon bearers, and they struck Absalom and put him to death. And Yoav sounded a piercing blast on the shofar, so that the fighting people turned back for pursuing after Israel. For Yoav held the people back, and they took Absalom. They threw him in the forest into a great pit, and they set over him a heap of stones, exceedingly large. When all Israel fled, each man to his tent. Now Absalom had undertaken to set up for himself during his lifetime a standing pillar that was in the valley of the king. For he said to himself, I have no son to whom I have my name recalled. So he called the standing pillar by his name, and it was called Avshalom's monument to this day. So what does it say every time we hear this, to this day? This is talking about something that happened a long time ago. It's a tale that's been told and retold, and it's quite apparent that this idea of Avshalom, in a sense, building his own monument while he was alive, is an additional irony to all of this. So the question will become, and who's going to tell the king that his son is dead? So he sends a servant, go tell the king what you have seen. The Cushite prostrated himself to Yoav and he ran off. But Achimaatz, son of Tzadok, once again said to Yoav, come what may, pray let me run too after the Cushite. For Yoav said, why should you run, my son, when you have no news that will find favor in David's eyes? And what does he say? Come what may, I want to run. And he said to him, run. And Achimaatz ran by the way of the Oval, past the Cushite. And David was sitting between the two gateways, and the watchman on the roof of the gate went over to the city wall. He lifted his eyes and saw, here a man was running alone. And the watchman called out and told the king, and the king said, he is alone. There is news in his mouth. And as he went, going along and coming nearer, the watchman saw another man running. So it's so interesting. And the watchman called out to the gatekeeper, here, there's another man running alone. And the king said, this one too must be bringing news. And the watchman said, I see that the running manner of the first one is like the running manner of Achimaatz, son of Tzadok. People knew how Achimaatz, son of Tzadok, ran. I didn't know that, but obviously this man knew. And then the king says, he is a good man, and with good news he comes. And Achimaatz called out and said to the king, peace, shalom. And he prostrated himself to the king, his brow to the ground. He says, blessed is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, who has turned over the men who lifted their hand against my lord king. And the king said, is there peace with the lad? Notice this. Is there shalom with the lad? Shalom, Avshalom. What does Avshalom mean? The father of peace. Avshalom is the father of peace. Is there peace with him, Avshalom? And Achimaatz said, I saw a great commotion when Yoav sent off the king's servant and your servant, but I don't know what it's about. The king says, turn around and station yourself here. He turned around and stopped. And then the second guy comes. Let my lord receive the news. The Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has vindicated you today from the hands of all rising against you. And the king said to the Cushite, is there peace with him? Again, notice the word. Is there peace with him? The lad Avshalom. And the Cushite said, may they be like that lad, may the Lord's king's enemies and all those who have risen against you for evil. And the king was shaken. So he went to the upper part of the gate and he wept. And thus he said as he went, oh, my son Avshalom, Absalom, Absalom, you may have heard this, in the book by, I believe, Faulkner has a book. My son Avshalom, who would give my dying my own in your place? Look at what he's saying. I would take me. Why did you take him? I would have put him in place. Avshalom, my son Avshalom. And it was told to Yoav, here the king is weeping and mourning over Avshalom. And now the deliverance became mourning on that day for all the people. For the people heard on that day, namely, the king is in pain over his son. So the people stole away on that day while coming into the city, like people stealing away, humiliated when they flee in battle. And now the king wrapped his face, and the king cried out in a loud voice, oh, my son Avshalom, Avshalom, my son, my son. And when Yoav came to the king in the palace house, he said, today you have shamed the face of all your servants who helped your life escape today, and the life of your sons and daughters, the life of your wives, the life of your concubines, by loving those who hate you, by hating those who love you. For you have declared today that you have no commanders or servants. For I know today, if Avshalom were alive and all of us today were dead, then it would be right in your eyes. What's wrong? Why are you mourning? He's saying, if the shoe was on the other foot, we'd all be dead by now. He wouldn't care. He doesn't have that kind of compassion. So arise, go out. Says, get it together. He's saying this to the king. Get it together. Speak to the heart of your servants, for by Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh I swear that if you do not go out, no man will lodge with you tonight, and there'll be evil for you, and more than all the evils that have come upon you from your youth until now. So the king arose and sat at the gate, while all the people they declared, saying, Here the king is sitting at the gate, and all the people came before the king. Very dramatic, very dramatic. Stop mourning. Don't sit shiva for Avshalom, because people will see this as a weakness in you, and they will desert you, and no one will be with you. And also remember, as I said earlier, if the shoe was on the other foot, we'd all be dead now. So he does what he's told, and he goes out into public again, sitting before the gates. And that's also where people would go for judgment. They would be sitting in between the gates, the Shah, the gate. Beautiful scene, painful, beautiful, but you get the sense of who David is. David has deep emotions. David loves his sons, and David has the capacity to exhibit that love, even though Yoav and others who are surrounding him find that very disconcerting and find it basically a way of debasing himself in front of those who follow the king. Any other stories that within these stories that alerted you to anything special? Anyone?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
I'm not quite sure how to word this, but usually what I was told is that when you are naming someone, you name them after someone whose attributes you like. And there are a plethora of women's names within all these writings. Some are unpronounceable or a little hard to pronounce, some are not. Why is the name Tamar still being used if you're naming the person after somebody who was raped? Is the first part of the question. And the second part is, do we know anything more about Tamar?
Right.
After that.
That's a very good question. First of all, where does the name Tamar figure prominently up before this? Anyone remember?
You can say.
You haven't read your Chumash?
Reuven.
With who? Yehuda.
Reuven.
No, Yehuda.
Yehuda, I mean, yeah.
Yes, Yehuda.
That was,
Yeah.
Yehuda and Tamar. You remember the story of Yehuda and Tamar? Yeah, everybody remember? No. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story real quickie. Yehuda, Judah, right, who is believe it or not, David sees himself somehow connected with the house of Judah, whatever. Judah marries off his eldest son, to a woman named Tamar. The son dies.
all these sons died.
Okay. So then he says, okay, she says to him, you're obligated, according to our tradition, that your second son should have a child with me and will give the child the name of the father who died, so his name will not be erased. Also, it means you will continue to support me, because as a widow, I've lost a lot of protection, right? My husband is no longer alive. So he sends his second son, and second son dies, right? And then she says, well, he died. You have another son, don't you? Named Onan, Onan. And he says, I don't think I wanted to marry you right now. 2 strikes. I don't want 3 strikes. 2 strikes. So he sends Onan, and Onan doesn't want to get her pregnant, and he spills his seed on the ground. So that's where you get the word onanism, right? Or masturbation, right? Spilling his seed on the ground. She's not very happy with this, obviously, because she's losing it. So the story goes on. Yehuda's off to a convention of sheep shearers, the famous sheep shearer conventions. Usually we're in Atlantic City, but then they had to move because Trump's hotel closed, whatever. Along the way, when you have these conventions, there are also ladies of the evening and the afternoon and ladies of the morning as well. It depends on what your schedule is like. And there's one woman sitting in front of a tent, and she's wearing a veil. And he says, oh, and she invites him in. Yehuda's, by the way, at this point, saying single guy, okay, whatever. And he has her way with her, and she says, well, can you, you have to pay. As well, oh, sure, I'm short of cash, So I'll give you my staff and my ring, And then, I'll give it to you a little later on. Okay. So she gets pregnant, and then she comes back, and she's no longer wearing the clothes of a harlot, but wearing the clothes of Tamar. And she says, aha, you didn't give me your son to fulfill this. You fulfilled it. And he says, what are you talking about? I never had any relationship with you. And she says, but here's these two things. Aren't they yours? And Yehuda says, wow, yes, it's me. It's me. So basically that's where Tamar, and she gives birth to twins. And those twins will basically be how should I say, the forebearers of many, many important people, up to Ruth. Ruth, right? If you remember Ruth's story, she goes with her mother-in-law, Naomi, back to Bethlehem, where David is found, and she's the grandmother of David. Very fascinating story. King David's grandmother was Ruth, who was a Moabite. It's kind of very interesting. So that's where Tamar is most well known from. Okay, Tamar. So that use of Tamar again is not strange, because ultimately Tamar is found righteous in that setting, right? She uses her noggin, to really do the right thing. And then we don't know. Does Tamar kill herself? Is Tamar banished? What happens to Tamar? We don't know. But then Avshalom, who loved Tamar, right? Who killed Amnon because he raped her, gave her his daughter a name Tamar. Not because it's a degradation to be a Tamar, on the contrary. And to this day, we give the name Tamar to people.
Thank you for the paradigm shift.
What does Tamar mean? Anybody know?
Palm tree, date palm.
Date palm tree, right? Date palm tree.
Well, that's my Hebrew name.
Oh, Tamar.
Sure.
Good. Anything you want to add to the Tamar story?
No, it's a really weird story.
It is a weird story, right? But so Tamar was not a name. He was doing it to keep her name alive. And it intimates to me that somehow Tamar disappears out of shame, whatever. She's out of it. We never hear from her again after that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Moshe, it seems that a lot of what we read today is sort of the playing out of Nathan's prophecy from chapter 12. Right. It says, behold, I shall raise evil against you from your own household. I shall take your wives away from your eyes and give them to your fellow man who will lie with them in the sight of the sun. Thus you have acted in secrecy. I shall perform this deed in the presence of all Israel before the sun, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And your son will surely die.
Right.
Or maybe
more than one. Son who dies, right? And then the second shall be Shlomo. But I think you're right. This is really a fulfillment of that prophecy, saying what you did basically undermines your authority. What you did.
Actually, another question is, how old is Shlomo? Is he so young that why he's not in the story, do you think?
Yes, he's very young. And as a matter of fact, when we get to the Shlomo piece at the beginning of the book of Kings, you'll read the first 2 chapters. That will be until David's death. They will actually die. He's very young, and it's quite clear that Bathsheba is going to be the what do you call it? The mother regent. What do you call that?
Queen mother.
Mother, right? The regent mother. She has a lot of ambition. There's no question about it. So we don't know how old he was. It doesn't say, but she makes it quite clear. I will be sitting with him, and he builds a throne. Reminds me of Game of Thrones, right? He builds a throne next to his throne for his mom. Oedipus, right? He loved his mother, right? Beautiful, beautiful. So yes, she plays a very a very important role. How this explains, Shlomo's behavior, I'll leave it to the psychologist of what it means when you're a mama's boy, and why you are in need to have women all around you all the time. Shlomo has women around him all the time. He's, according to the legends, he had 1,000 wives, right? And they all had credit cards at Bloomingdale's. It was really a big problem. Very expensive, 1,000 wives, 1,000. but he basically surrounds himself with women all the time. It's very fascinating. And I'll leave it for Lydia, who's a therapist, to tell me why. Why, Lydia?
I'm not going to go into that tonight,
Okay.
but I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It is sort of the psychological piece that I'm struggling with David.
Yeah.
So the hardest part for me is trying to understand the relationships with the kids that turn on him. Yes, we have this all through history, the rivalry, the kids, battling. We also have in certainly in the Bible, you get a much better flavor for what kind of father the fathers are. I get no flavor for him as a dad. And I also see, like, when we started to read this section, what I had trouble with most, 13 to 19, and maybe we skipped 2 chapters, so I lost that part. Separate from the prophecy, he feels like a totally different person to me as a king. And I was having trouble thinking, what is explaining this? What's the motivation for this big shift in him into such a more passive, accepting his sons with whatever they do, and sort of being so much more vulnerable? So that's my question.
I think many of the people who read the story, the scholars, they see the Bathsheba incident, Nathan's speaking truth to power, warning him, and that sort of changes him. I wouldn't say he loses his ego; he's still there, but he's much more circumspect. And I think he really perhaps took very seriously Natan saying to him, look, what you did really undermined you. You don't realize it perhaps because you did it in a maelstrom of lust, if I can use that term, name of my next book, The Maelstrom of Lust, right? Maybe that's the reason that you couldn't keep it together. And he's, in a sense, I didn't say he's falling apart, but a part of him has fallen from him. And I think that's what shows the shift. He's out of the picture a little bit more. People have to come to him. He doesn't know what's going on as much. He's always waiting to hear from other people. He's distanced himself. Now, before that, he was very involved with the people, right? He hung around with the people. He danced with them. He sang with them. And that changes. Now, is it self reverent? Is he doing some deeper thinking about who he is? Is he showing signs of weakness that Avshalom picks up on? Or is Avshalom very upset because his mother, whoever she was, we don't know exactly which one, she was the one that said to Avshalom, you will be the heir to your father David. And I wonder if he heard about Shlomo or not. I wonder. And that says, well, now's the time. I've got to do it now, or there's no other time where it's going to work. And there are people disgruntled now with David. He's been around for a while. You've been around for a while. You get people angry at you for all kinds of things. I'll gather those people together. People with, what's the term we hear today, Dad? People with grievances, right? We have a grievance culture now in America, right? I have grievance, and that's why I wanted to see the whole thing fall apart, or I want to take it over one way or the other. So I think that's what's gone on here. He sees this is the right time to do it. He thinks David has indeed retreated. He's stuck in his palace more than he is out there. And he says, look, I have all the attributes, thank God. I am David's son. I am handsome, I am powerful, and I am the one who deserves to be king. And that's what drives Avshalom. Obviously, the storyteller wants to say to us, well, it didn't work, Avshalom. David, and later Bathsheba will say to him, you will always be alive, David. David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. David will always be with us. You are mythic. You are beyond one time in history. You are forever. And that's what she believed. And Shlomo, I think her son, also believed that was his right to do that and to have the honor, because he was never a warrior, Shlomo. Very fascinating. Shlomo was never a warrior like Avshalom. He will get the permission to build the Bet Mikdash, where his father is denied that. So it all fits into a larger picture of him receding creating a bit of a vacuum, a small one, but vacuums like to be filled, and people take advantage of the opportunities to do that.
Reb Moshe?
Reb Moshe.
In Second Kings, they do talk about the Davidic line, and certain people are saved because they're part of the Davidic line. So that's what you were talking about, that he
that's right, and he becomes the model of the Davidic line, and we use the term a great deal. The Mashiach is the son of David, right? Mashiach is the son of David. Mashiach ben David. We use it all the time. We say it all the time. So the king of David's progeny, whoever it will eventually be the one who saves the people. Ed, and then we have someone else. Yes, Ed, please.
It's the time in the class where I start to blaspheme. I'm reading this, and I got to tell you, it sounds like a badly written soap opera. People die, they come back to life, they go away, the motivations aren't clear. It's like a bunch of, no disrespect to young children in schoolyards, but like a bunch of bullies running around a schoolyard, pointing fingers here, pointing fingers there, manipulating this, manipulating that. And there's very little nuance. I mean, it's not the world that I know. There's not it may be gray because it flip-flops back and forth between black and white, but it's all black and white. As I see it. Also, when there are decision points, often to interject something from, the Trump presidency, I knew if a decision was going to be made, I wasn't going to like it. And I look at this and I sort of say, it's, so I don't know, it leaves me wanting. And I also have the sense, it's also quite Shakespearean, and perhaps if I could read the original Hebrew, it would have that flavor to it. But the translations are lacking in that artistry but they are translations. I just look at it and I say, really? So that's my blasphemous contribution for this evening.
It's not blasphemous at all. It's basically the figures here are stark, not subtle. That's right. There's no subtlety here. I agree with you. There's no subtlety. And we expect a certain amount of that. I don't know why when it comes to power, people are often very unsubtle or non-subtle when they want something real bad, and they make it very clear what they want. But I agree. Look, soap opera or not, we know that the story has intrigued people for a long, long, long time. And the figure of David became, as I say, far beyond anything in historical reality. He became metaphysical in a way, that David becomes the symbol of the Mashiach, and by the way, he is a Mashiach, by the way, because every king was anointed. That's what a Mashiach means, the anointed one. So yes, he is a Mashiach. But the idea that he will be the Mashiach, that the rabbinic tradition will make into the one who brings back, world peace and all that, you don't really have that here. Even though you're right, and we read in the first two chapters of Kings, you will see indeed that Bathsheba has that vision of him. Now, I think another thing that we have to consider is how much is Bathsheba playing behind the scenes.
Ramosh, that's what I was going to talk about, is Bathsheba's role in this.
Right.
What we're seeing is David over the years has gotten weaker mentally or physically. He's no longer the fighter. He's inside. He's more isolated, and he has all these wives and whatever. But then he has Bathsheba, who is powerful, and she wants her son to have that. And this is like very common in men that marry many women. She wants her son to be the next king, and she, younger, is probably manipulating him in many ways. And I think that's the story that we have. It's
last week in the Torah, we heard about a woman named Sarah.
Yes, but it's her power in this case.
I don't want this the son Yishmael to be the heir. I know what's best for you. I know it's best for me. I know it's best for the future of Israel. right? Now, I don't give Bathsheba those kinds of kudos. Maybe she wasn't that kind of person. And I always felt a little wary about her because I think she very quickly saw that it was an advantage to have her husband killed. And I mentioned last time it was strange that the husband didn't want to, when he came on for R&R, didn't go home to sleep with her.
And they had no children.
And they had no children. So there's a side of me that says that she was a sort of, I don't know if it was an active collusion, but or she plotted it, or she whispered in his ear, maybe you can get rid of Uriah. You know, he's a real pain in the butt. I don't like him anyway. I don't know if that's the case or not, but because the text doesn't tell us. So there's room, and there has been room, and there have been a number of novels written about this, of course, stories, etc., about it. Try to read between the lines and try to understand it. The Midrash as well. Midrash is an apologetic work. The Midrash all wants to make King David smell like a rose. And they don't want to because by that time David's become already a symbol of the Mashiach, etc. So they don't want to besmudge him in any way. Yeah.
But in writing this story, because the story is written, what would be the message that the writer would have wanted us to go away with? The power of the king, the power of the woman behind the king.
Yes.
There is the message.
There is a message. I agree. And since we don't know, it's up to us to delve into it with our imagination. I think that's one of the powerful ways of reading any text that we read, is that we insert our imagination. Jeffrey and then Ken.
David unified the country. There were these 12 independent tribes, and while he was king, it was a unified country. And several generations later,
Shlomo destroys that.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting, you know, because Shlomo's been given a lot of good press, as you know, over the years. He was the wisest. He could talk to the animals. A lot of wonderful legends of Shlomo, and he's, you know. But if you look at the text, I don't get a chance to do. You have every right to read on your own. You don't have to be in class to read. I want you to know you're allowed. It's open, and you can get it for free. You read it. And if you have never read the story of Shlomo, I think it's worth reading, because he, as I said earlier, he transgresses every one of the parameters of what a king should be. And I think that's why it went into Deuteronomy, which was written late. Understand? Deuteronomy was written probably in the 8th century, and Shlomo was there at the 10th century or so. So they knew about the disaster of Shlomo's reign. Ken.
So I've read this David story at least several times, and of course heard of it, you know, as I was growing up. And so I always had this vision of David, the great king, the great leader of the country, this great hero. And you pointed out that after, you know, in the rabbinical period and afterwards, David somehow turned into the Messiah, or, you know, he's this supernatural hero. But
the Messiah, Messiah is not supernatural in our position.
Sorry.
Okay, he's just a great warrior, right?
Great warrior. But so many of his traits are so reprehensible that I just don't know how did he come to take on this, you know, these mythic proportions, when first of all, you know, Samuel's warning, don't get a king. And then if you read all of Kings, you know why he said that.
Right.
And Israel's never had a king since, although they've had people, obviously, that are trying to be kings. And it never works out very well. So how did David somehow take on this proportion, where, you know, this reputation of being like the Messiah?
It's a very good, there's something about the character that people were fascinated by, because we rarely have something as full length of a biography, in a way, you know, quote, like this story. We don't know much about Moses as a young man. We know nothing about Abraham at all, right? So it's interesting how much we know about this guy, and how he evolves from being this slingshot master, right, who kills Goliath, all the way to a person who is strong enough to unify and create a kingdom. Just by his sense of success, plus, and you'll see in chapter 22, and I'll give you instructions about the next week. Chapter 22, we see a fantastic fantastic psalm written by David, the singer, the poet. And that leads to the attribution of the book of Psalms to David because of chapter 22, which you'll read it for next week.
Although, like Shakespeare, he probably didn't write half the Psalms or most of the Psalms.
Oh, no, he didn't. He didn't write any of it. But I'm saying the attribution is based upon chapter 22, which says, wow, that's really gorgeous. And that really does not come through pretty much in the translations, which is often the case. And in general, you're right. If you had read this in Hebrew, you would be taken in by wordplay, subtlety of language, which does not come through in the translation. I agree with you. You know, using the same word in different situations, etc. It was much more of, if you will, thick rather than thin. Because right now you're saying it's a thin story, pretty much. You know, black and white, good guys, bad guys, bad guys, bad guys. Right? There's a lot of bad guys all around. But I agree. I think that David, because of that psalm, because of his relationships, that he had a tenderness to him. Remember, for all of you say I don't want to use the term he was a softie. He wasn't a softie, but the way he loved Shaul was trying to kill him. The way he mourned Shaul was trying to kill him. The way he mourns all of his sons, even the son who wanted to kill him. It's just that there's something about David that is complex. It is complex. And this complexity, I think, people found fascinating, that he brought together these different emotions. That's another reason they attributed Psalms to him, because Psalms are so filled with fear and envy and praise. It's just a very, very thick text, Psalms. Each one is remarkable in its own way. So that's what I think. I think that the complexity of David, his success in uniting the kingdom, his obviously sense of tenderness, basically made him a very, very palatable. For us, many of us would find him very unpalatable, but I find him palatable. I think he lived in tough times, when people are beheading everybody every once in a while. But, it's unfortunately, human nature hasn't changed, and the quest for power is still there. And unfortunately, as we know, there's a lot of collateral damage.
But then also, when you look at our, three forefathers, you can't really get close to them. I mean, you don't have the same feeling for them that you have for David. They're
right. For them, we have filial piety.
Right.
Filial piety. Right. We say, okay, this is where we came from, and we always want to hearken back to the promise made to Abraham, right? And it's an ironic promise. I'll make you like the sands of the sea, and make you like the stars of the sky, and the entire world will be blessed through you. I don't think the world feels that way much about us today, even though they should. If you think about our contributions, but they're not interested in our contribution.
Yep.
So we're in treacherous times, my friends. I don't want to, be pessimistic. I won't be, but I do think I'm glad they're having this march finally. It took a while to do it, but if you're able to go, please do. And I think one of our students tonight said she would, if you need a place to stay, she'll give you a place to stay if you can get down there Monday night if you get down. So I think we're in a place where we're looking. I think we've always been in a place, the Jewish people, looking for heroes, because in general, what the hero does for us is, first of all, it gives us a sense that maybe we have power. Maybe we have the capacity to persevere. So David became that kind of strength that I think was very helpful to people psychologically. We once had a King David. We shall have something like a King David again. And I think that's really what the power is there. And as I say, and David is, it's a beautiful name. It means beloved one. Interesting. Beloved one. and he does become beloved. There's no question. No, now again, the statue of David didn't hurt. Oh, that's a hell of that's a buff guy. Oh, yeah, but it's a young one.
Mm-hmm.
There is very much of old David. You don't see much of that, right? It's young David, right? So again, I have no concrete answers, but I do know that in Christianity and Islam, following Judaism, he becomes a figure as well. Not as prominent, obviously, but he's treated with great respect. And I don't think he became Saint David. Maybe there is a Saint David. I'm not sure, but it was easy in those days to become a saint. Even today it seems to be possible, but I am not vying for the position. I promise you. So for next week, 20 to 24, we finish it up, Samuel 2, and then they read the first 2 chapters of First of Kings, and it has a interesting, as I mentioned, pay attention to what he says to Shlomo on his death. It's very interesting. It's very different than what Jacob said about his sons. It's a very different kind of.
Yes.
So, we're over time a little bit. Thank you for bearing with me, and I look forward to next week. It'll be our last session for now, and as I say, we'll see. We'll continue.
We hope so.
What?
We hope we continue.
Yes, I'm intending to stay alive. I hope for at least.
Yeah.
Stay present.
I'll try my best.
Work at it. Yep.
Can't guarantee anything, but I try my best. And we'll figure out something, because there's a side of me now that really, because of the events of the last month, I mean, to be very honest, I've been very discombobulated by it. Yeah, I mean, really discombobulated. I am not sure how this is all going to land.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that
you're not alone, Moshe.
Such a big unknown. I mean, it really for us, it changes everything. What if Israel could no longer be seen as a haven for Jews? How? Even if it continues to exist, which I hope it will. I think it will. I mean, I'm not that pessimistic, but it shatters that entire mythos. The entire mythos is shattered now. And when I hear that my kids' school, Schechter, right? Schechter, the day school in Boston, has 35 Israeli kids here now, integrated into the program. It's a beautiful thing. But the bottom line, imagine you're sending your kids to Newton to be safe.
Yeah.
We say
during this craziness, there are still people making Aliyah.
Yes,
from
I'm sure.
the United States and France.
I have a feeling you're right. I think you're going to see the end of your.
It's been reported.
It's the end of your European journey. Well, France have been coming for a while now. For 25 years, they've been more French. They bought all of Tel Aviv. Near the ocean. They like the ocean. Because Israel asked, for them, they don't go to the coast, of Nice in France as Jews. They come to sit on the beach in Tel Aviv and be able to wear their Jewish stars on their chest, which they cannot do in France. So I think it might be the end of European Jewry, which is, there was already, what can I say? It was flip-flopping a little bit anyway. So I think the same thing's happening in England, and the same thing's happening in France. Certainly the smaller countries where there aren't that many.
Not here.
Right. So it's as I say, this is an inflection point. There's no question about it. It's an inflection point for us as a people. I just didn't think we would have to do it twice in a century. I hope to, that's the great disappointment too. Great disappointment.
Yeah.
And I won't get into the politics of the Jewish community, but we don't expect that people who are working for coexistence now with Palestinians are going to be doing real well for a while. I don't think that's going to be an agenda item, right? Etc. So, because we have our crazies too, Baruch Hashem. We have our crazies, and what's going on in the West Bank, with settlers and stuff, and it's not a pretty picture on many sides here. So what can we do? You know, in the long run, I'm optimistic because I believe there will be a Mashiach someday, right? I'm so optimistic that I used to have the radio tunes like many of you did for the news when you got up at BUR. Remember that? Everybody put their clock to 7 or 8 and they want to hear the news. So I'm always hoping I turn it on and they say, well, the Messiah has come, no news today. We'll play happy music all day. Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? I'm ready. When the Mashiach's ready, I don't know, but I'm ready. So in the long run, I'm very optimistic, and we've gone through a lot, and we'll get through this too. In the short run, it's a lot of damage along the way. That's all. A lot of damage along the way. So what can I say? Put on a happy face or whistle while you work or something. I don't know. But I'm stopping finally to watch Israeli news. I can't watch it anymore because it's only the stories of 30 days ago coming out in more graphic ways. And the stories of the people who were kidnapped and the stories of the people who died and the soldiers' faces. And you see every soldier's face, it's a beautiful 19-year-old or a 20-year-old. And you know that their families' lives can be changed forever. And you see the pictures of what's going on in Gaza. And it's just very hard. So, let's keep being Jews. That's the answer. Let's keep being Jews. Let's try to keep together. I know it's hard. It took a war in Israel to get people to come together. That's what it took. I hope it doesn't take that here. So, I'm glad to see there are some people now who have been, I wouldn't say estranged from Judaism, but there's some people who have faced the fact that anti-Semitism doesn't really care if you go to shul. Yeah. They really don't ask you questions. By the way, are you Reform? Then you're okay. So are people taking on again their identity now? I've noticed. It's a fascinating thing, that they're saying, well, I have to become true to myself because that's the only thing I have is me and what I am and what I'm connected to, because I don't want to be defined by the outside. I want to be defined from myself, and that's helpful to us. And I'm glad that TBZ, people come to shul and people are not afraid, and they're doing what they can for each other. And you look at all the mitzvahs that we do and the things that we're involved in. Yes, there is disappointment. Some of our woke colleagues don't get it pretty much, but that's going to change too.
What?
That's going to change too.
Oh, okay.
I think so. You begin to say, oh, you mean Hamas is not part of the ACLU? Some of them will wake up to that a little bit. It'll take a while, but they'll wake up that they're betting on the wrong side. So
you should.
I think so. Whether we'll be able to make peace with these people again, I don't know. That's going to be a big issue around, So I wish you all the best. And I have to go out too, so I'm going to leave. And have a wonderful evening. And it's a good parsha this week, by the way. Good parsha, Chaye Sarah. It's a good parsha. If you're not going to shul, read it. Just read it. That's the best thing. Read the Bible, and then you'll realize how little you know. It's good.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye.